is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Red Sister, chapters 30, 31, 32, and 33. In these chapters, Nona goes back to the Kaltess to face down a bunch of kids who do not know what they are doing, and then some other kids who know a little bit better what they're doing, and unexpectedly comes across her nemesis. He don't look so good. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Martin for commissioning this episode. Martin is here in the chat with me. I also want to say thanks to Mark Lawrence for retweeting like every episode of this. I don't know if you are still listening to them or if you're just retweeting because you just, liked the first one. But, appreciate it. Appreciate you. So these chapters, guys, are super weird. And I'm starting to get to this point where I'm like, I feel like I'm probably not alone in this. There are a lot of books where, and shows as well, where they feed you many different mysteries or pieces of mysteries. And then you start to sort of hit critical mass, and then you begin to learn some of the answers to some of the questions. And there is a period in there where it can go either way. And for some of us, we start to get really, really annoyed that we're getting more mysteries and not getting answers yet. Like, it starts to feel a little bit overwhelming with the mystery. I am approaching that point. I'm not saying I'm there, but I am getting to a point now where I'm like, okay, we're starting to have maybe too many balls in the air, and we need to not necessarily resolve them. That's totally, we're not there yet, but I need to be fed a bit more information because I feel like I'm the blind leading the blind a little bit. I had a problem like this, not exactly really, but with the Witcher books as well. There were times where I just felt like I didn't know how to cover them because I didn't know what was happening. And I'm not there with this. With Witcher, it could be more frustrating at times, and I turned out to be paying attention to information that wound up not really even being that relevant. But there are a lot of things about this world that I'm just learning or I am wanting to learn about and have been since like something was mentioned ages ago and still don't know what it is. And without some of like being fed just a little bit more information, I don't really have a sense of where we're going. And I don't need to know that like in detail, but I would like to have some sort of feel for things. And that's not necessarily the author's fault. I might just be that kind of reader, and the author is not interested in telling that kind of story, and that's totally valid. There's so many different ways of telling a story out there, and it's bound to be that some people want it one way and others don't. And all this to say, as I already said, I'm not even quite there yet with this, but I can feel myself inching in that direction. And I'm starting to be like, I need more of something before you continue to introduce other stuff, because I'm genuinely beginning to lose track of some of what's going on here. I think, Martin, in the last live chat, did you show up late and comment afterwards, because when I started this session, there were some comments in there that I don't feel like I saw when I was recording. And you mentioned that the new high priest is the one that they had voted on. And I completely forgot that we actually saw this guy get chosen and that he was one of the Archons. So I'm a little bit concerned now, because I was really feeling like, well, we chose one of the Archons and they all seem pretty reasonable. So chances are that this next high priest is going to be a pretty reasonable person who isn't in anyone's pocket. And then we get, I don't want to say immediate confirmation that that's not actually true, but we get Martin says that wasn't me, but yes, it is. Okay, cool. But we get a bit of alarming detail on the fact that maybe this high priest has a different person that they are beholden to, and that's all it is. You know, the previous one was loyal to whom they were loyal to, and the only difference is that this one's loyal to somebody else. And I don't even feel like saying that he is in her pocket feels a little strong, but it does seem as if she is very good at manipulating him. I don't want to say that he's like on her side specifically. I feel like she's almost like a fairy in the way that she knows how to manipulate the law and push like the boundaries of what is customary without actually like breaking rules, and just generally being extremely forceful. And maybe he doesn't exactly know how to withstand that sort of, I don't even want to say assault, but that sort of approach. Martin says, Glass flat out says, for all his faults, Nevis won't sell himself nearly as cheap. Yeah, I feel like this is a guy who either isn't totally aware how much he's being manipulated, is totally aware but unable to withstand this because he knows that they are still within their rights and there's only so much that he can do, or she's got something on him. And I don't really get that vibe, but it might be, you know. So let's start with 30, though. The Kaltess had a smell all its own. I love this. It's a description of all of the smells here. And it ends with the Kaltess could be inhaled and known in a single breath from floor to rafter. I love this so much. I thought that was such a great line. That is something that is a really like a truism. And I feel this way about a lot of places in my life when I return to them. The scent is really the thing that gets the brain going. I feel like I've read that the memory is very, very attached to scent in a way that it isn't necessarily to other senses. And I cannot tell y'all how much scent affects things for me. So she is here with some of the other students. And she has sisters Tallow, Flint, and Rock with her. And what's really interesting here is that I thought this was really, really going to be a challenge. And it winds up being once they get to the other kids who are more advanced and have had more training. But initially, it's just sort of like a testing ground. And I wasn't prepared for them to go up against like kids. And I feel kind of bad for them. Like it's not, of course, Clara, whom I do not feel bad for. Clara's having a bit too good of a time here. But in general, I kind of feel like what a shitty position to be put in, that you've like spent all of this time training and really like honing and perfecting a lot of skills that other people don't have. And then you're put into a position where you're up against somebody who is utterly incapable of defending themselves. And there's not really there's no challenge to it, but more than that, there's like no honor to it, really, you know? It's like somebody trying to have me enter a cooking competition against somebody like Owen, who doesn't even know how to dice onions, you know? It's just what are you really proving? But it's meant to just sort of show, as it turns out, their purchaser exactly how they're going to perform if he continues in training them, and not how they're going to perform as a fighter, because that's impossible to know when the kids don't know how to fight. It seems more like it's about how is this kid going to react to getting hit? How are they going to handle pain and a confrontation against somebody that's like very physical and very upfront. And their attitude there will sort of help you determine whether or not they're going to be able to manage to learn what they would need to learn later. So let's see. I love the fact that Nona is really irritated that the ring is a rectangle, but that they still call it the ring. I like that she has this sort of like, because I get like that sometimes about certain things. With this, not particularly, because it's so ingrained in me that the ring is square. I don't even think about it anymore, but I really enjoy that that's something she gets hung up on. And also that she keeps thinking about how there are all these little like holes and gaps in the ceiling, and she is very aware that there is a child with their eye pressed up to every single opening, because she remembers being up there and being one of them watching everybody. And she feels a certain kind of pressure from that, even though it's not necessarily anybody that she knew while she was here. It's been 2 years. Like, the people who were here when she was are going to be down on the floor about to fight her. But it's, I like her being on the other end of things, you know? So let's see. Gretcha passes by at one point, and Clara is like, oh my God, because she is humongous. It says the woman's arms were as thick as Nona's whole body, banded by tattoos patterned in red and black like a winding serpent. Now, later on, I believe there is a Garant who is like 8 feet tall. And it makes me wonder, this is not a book that could easily be adapted for the screen. I feel like this is a book that would work as something animated, probably. Because I don't see how you have like an 8-foot opponent who still like looks human and has like human proportions and manage to make that look believable. But yeah, I just sort of like stopped and tried to picture this, and I couldn't do it. I think the tallest person that I've ever met was like probably like 7 feet, I think, because there was this basketball player who used to come into the Whole Foods I worked at. And that's about like, and even that, it's hard for me to picture because they're such an anomaly walking around. Everybody turns to stare at somebody who's 7 foot, like, whoa. And I can't even call to mind what they looked like. And I love the details about some of these fighters, like looking like really fierce in one way, but then lacking a certain fierceness in another. There's a Garant who is a mass of muscle, and it says he had what looked to be deliberate facial scars, making something demonic of his smile, though the eyes above lacked malice. And I like that. It's, he makes himself look a little freaky, but in his eyes you can see that he's like, not really, The other, balding, his gray hair cut to a stubble, scowled as though he'd happily eat a novice whole, given half a chance. Bless him. And it turns out that the younger man is named Aegon, which, of course, there's no way to not think of Song of Ice and Fire with this name. He sailed from Dern, said Alata. How do you know? Everyone knows, Clara said, before a snap of Sister Tallow's fingers sent them all back to their tasks. So I'm wondering if this person is going to wind up being important later. I feel like, Aegon is going to mean something, but we will have to wait and see. So they are, like I said, Partnus Reeve wants to get the measure of some of his new purchases. And Partnus is the one who purchased Nona way back in the day. And Nona decides to sort of go like fairly easy on these kids and give them a bit of a chance to like get away from her before finally putting them down. It's almost like she wants them to not be humiliated by her just fucking like laying them out, and is trying to at least give them the sense that they got a chance to like fight back at all. And it's a mark of who she is that that's how she decides to handle this, because there are a lot of different like ways of coping with what's going on here. On the first day, Zoli, Clara, and Nona found themselves pitched against a long succession of Caltus trainees. Trainees meant attic children purchased by Partnus and set to chores by Maya until it became clear what their potential might be. So then we get to see exactly how everybody handles this. Zoli fought the trainees with brutal efficiency, seeming intent on putting each onto the boards with a minimum number of blows. Isht came to the ring for Zoli's fights and barked at her in the ice tongue. Commands? Encouragements? Threats? Nona never knew. Nona found herself giving her opponents a chance, letting them swing, punishing them for mistakes rather than for effort. Clara seemed to revel in the chance to hit and not be hit, using her opponents as practice dummies, peppering them with dozens of punches as if seeing how many times she could hit them before they fell. After her first half dozen finished by a dull-looking giant of a farm boy, she jumped out spattered with blood and grinning like a lunatic. Listen, I know I've been saying that Clara alarms me, but like I really need to say it. Clara worries me very deeply. And, you know, I'm just a bystander as a reader. I don't get to see the day-to-day of what she's like and how she handles her work. I am dying to know if the sisters see this, because Kettle clearly sees something. She's the one who warns Nona not to trust Clara, and is like, basically, girl, I know you like are loyal and everything, but like not everybody really deserves that. And of course, Nona ain't here to hear that at all. Nona decided that her and Clara were friends, and as far as she is concerned, that is all anybody needs to know about it. And she will do her duty because that is what she agreed to when she decided that someone was her friend. And that's really unfortunate, because Clara is not her friend. Clara is out for Clara. You know, she is interested in what she can do to help her own situation. She flat out says later, we'll get to this truth serum fucking thing. She flat out says that she isn't planning to stay after she gets all of her training. That this is like an accumulation of skills, but she isn't planning on being part of the Abbey or like becoming a sister. And I am not thrilled that she's already planning to bail. Like, I had it in my head that Clara was here. I don't even want to say for the right reasons, but just that Clara was here initially because she was after becoming a sister. And that if anything, you know, if she wound up not being, it was because she wound up sort of straying and coming up against some opposition, maybe from the sisters, from the belief system, from her, you know, her own, like, bloodthirstiness, maybe getting her, like, thrown out. But I did not think that she was going to just, like, go into this eyes wide open, aware that, oh, yeah, no, I'm not staying. I just need this knowledge, and then I'm out. I really didn't think that's how this was going in her head. And the fact that is how it works, I'm not 100% sure what the ritual is in this regard. I imagine that the other nuns have to be kind of aware that this is what she planned, but it remains very unclear to me how much the nuns are in contact with people's families or talk to them about the goals for somebody, or, you know, what the expectation really even is. Martin asks, do you think Nona wants to be a nun? I don't think so. But I also kind of felt like Nona, whatever Nona wants, whatever Nona wants, doesn't really matter in the end. I don't feel Nona has a ton of agency in terms of the big picture in her life. I feel like she gets a lot of moments to make small choices that affect things. But I feel like she's somebody who does what she's told to an extent, and that maybe she doesn't necessarily want to be a nun, but if circumstances were to collect in such a way that that looked like the easiest course of action and the most practical or safest, most stable course of action, that she would just wind up doing it because of that, because Nona needs stability in her life because she's never had that. And she craves it. So it's not even, for me, it's not whether she wants to be a nun or not, so much as will she find what she wants in that community? I think she could, but that depends on a lot of extraneous factors. It's just what she wants doesn't even enter the equation as much for me as everything else. And I don't know how to feel about that as a person. I mean, that's how life can be. We talk about doing what you really want to do with your life. And the truth is it's not even just that doing what you really want sounds good and doesn't necessarily work out. It's that so many of us don't really know what we want, or we think we do. And then we kind of start to get it and we realize, oh God, no. This is not what I was interested in at all. And Nona's super young. So I wouldn't be surprised if somebody asked her right now, do you want to be a nun? If she was just you know. So yeah, Clara is just really fucking alarming here. Just wanting to basically bully kids who have no training and stand no chance. The fact that she has fun with that is bewildering to me. This is somebody that, to use my earlier example of me being put up against my fiance in a cooking contest, this is if I were put up against him and beat him and then really crowed over it afterwards. Why? It would mean nothing, you know? And it's just an exercise in a little bit of petty cruelty for her. And it's just gross. Clara, do not like you. So Nona goes up against this one boy with really long hair, and he manages to get a hit in. And I love this. Ouch. She wiped at her mouth, her hand coming away scarlet, and offered a red grin in return. The remainder of that fight was short, vicious, and one-sided. Nona shouted, "Next!" before the fight master got a chance to, which I fucking endlessly entertaining. I love that so much. So here comes the handsome Geraint, and this dude is really fucking feeling himself. It seems clear that the other kids like him because he's getting a lot of cheers, and Nona makes very quick work of him and slides between his legs, bats up at his balls, and gets a really solid hit, and he just fucking crumples like a wet piece of paper. So yeah, I really loved that moment. It reminded me a little bit of Indiana Jones coming up against the dude who's got the fucking scimitar and is just whipping it around, and then Indy just pulls out a gun and shoots him. So the other bouts were similarly short, with no Cal Test trainees coming close to victory, though the Hunska boy who hit Nona did manage to score a knife mark against Croy before she sliced his throat. And it says sliced in quotes because it's not actually a fight to the death. So then they go up against the apprentices, and these are the ones who are, they're better. You know, they're not our crew is not getting the drop on everybody the way that they did last time. Alata, with her Hunska speed, won 2 rounds against 2 Garen apprentices. And this is the one, the first of them, the hulking redhead from Nona's attic days, Denim. He now loomed almost 8 foot in height, and his body looked ready to burst with the pressure of all the muscle heaped around his bones. And I love when Alata spun inside his guard and thrust her wooden blade into his gut. He snatched it from her in one huge hand, and for a moment Nona thought he would just reach out and crush her head. But the fight master's shouts reached him, and he flung both swords down before leaving the ring cursing. Which, yeah, that tells you pretty much all you need to know about his sportsmanship. Croy doesn't win up against anybody. And the first one who goes up against Alata and beats her is Regal. Regol. And this is somebody who Nona remembers. And she, it turns out a little bit later, has a bit of a crush on him. So I really enjoy this bit where going up against Regal is like a bit of a... I mean, have you guys ever kind of gone up against somebody who you like and you have to really like remember, yeah, but this is a competition though, and I'm not gonna let the fact that I'm sort of into them interfere with this, because I have. And in the end, I'm always able to set that aside, because as far as I have always been concerned, even from a kid, it's a weird thing because Nona talking in the very first chapters about how she doesn't want to be too good at things because she's going to lose friends. That has been a thing that I have very much dealt with in my life, but only regarding female friends. When it came to going up against boys, I always made sure to do my best, because I always was aware I did not want a guy who was interested in me to be unable to keep up with me. This was something like, I don't know why I didn't make the same connection, that maybe that should be what you do with your friends also. But it's not really the same. With friends, you can appreciate differences and you can each have different strengths. But when you are with a partner and you are far better at things than they are, or like a lot of different things, it can cause a sort of resentment. And I needed to know right away if somebody would be interested if I was still better at things than them, because I can't deal with a person who can't deal with a smart, capable partner. So let's see. Oh, there's a moment here that's interesting. Tarkax, who is the name of the guy, the ice triber that she thinks back and remembers him telling her how her anger is like really important and something to be used. It says he's off to the side watching Nona, but not really seeming to like recognize her. Isht stood by his side, both of them muttering to each other with just a twitching of lips. Nona wondered what they would have to talk about. Perhaps just ice warriors sharing their contempt of corridor battle skills. But Ara had said Sherzal had attended Thurin Taxis's ball, and Partnus lay under the Taxis thumb. If Tarkax was his creature and Yisht was Sherzal's. And this sort of fades off. She doesn't get to really like pursue this line of thought. But this concerns me. You know, I don't know anything about Tarkax. I'm sort of like picturing him as being on our side because of the fact that he helped Nona out that one time, but that's not necessarily anything, you know? So Regal comes into the ring. It's like, oh, Nona, you grew up. And she's like, oh shit, he remembers me. What's up? And at this point, he goes for a kick. And I should mention, he goes for a kick after pointing out the fact that Raymond Taxis is in the fucking audience. Now, this motherfucker, his 9-foot frame wrapped in a mole dark cape that couldn't hide the broadness of him. 9 feet. 9 feet tall. Okay. I do not know how I didn't remember that this was how he looked, but like, that's insane. A silver circlet held his golden hair back from his brow, and the face beneath had changed. The veins on the right side of his neck stood black against his flesh, like tendrils of night rising from his cape, and something was amiss with his left eye, though at such a distance Nona couldn't tell what exactly. Perhaps it was just full of blood. Nona, no, it is not just full of blood. It is full of something else, and I am not a fan of whatever it is. So she says to Regal, so what, he came to see me fight? And he says he came to see you hurt. And she's like, so what, you intend to hurt me? And he's like, no, I'm just going to put you down and make sure that you submit early and quickly, so I've got an excuse to stop. And I love the fact that she like takes his advice here, because I kind of wondered if she would just be, I wondered if she would be like me, where I am somebody who can be very contrary and not in a way, like, defiance is necessary to, like, you know, break new paths and push the limits and boundaries of what is commonly accepted. But defiance also can just stem from like a contrarian nature that isn't really concerned with what's best and only just does what it does because somebody said that they shouldn't. And that's sort of what I can be like. And I'm really glad that Nona has the fucking sense to not be like me, because I really was worried for a second that she was just going to make the kind of choice I would have made, which is to say, not surrendering, because she was like, no, screw you, I can do this. And he also tells her, don't let Denham get a hold of you. So I feel like that is a warning that Denham is being handled by this Toxis in such a way as to get her hurt even worse. Like, this is not somebody who's fighting for the sake of the fight. He's somebody who was sent into the fight with a mission. Also, when Nona makes eye contact with Raymel, there's this like feeling that she gets in her guts. And she's suddenly afraid in a way that she has not been afraid for a minute. This feeling is sort of unfamiliar to her at this point. So, fucking Regal just kicks out, and she does the thing that she usually does, which is tries to sort of slow time down using the abilities that she has, and is startled when it just doesn't seem to slow down. It just doesn't really work. And it turns out that he has Hunska blood, and he's like reached his potential already, which is kind of unusual for how young he is. But he is faster than she is, which is not something that she comes across very often at all. And it becomes clear pretty quickly that she is not going to win this fight. Like, he is just so fast that the best she's able to do most of the time is get out of the way. And it's not even like that works every time. Finally, he makes a move that encourages her to sort of like jump over his leg toward him, where his body apparently is like wide open. But she's like midair coming at him when she realizes that he is aware that's what she's going to do. And that was like the point. And he puts up an elbow and she like goes right into it and falls. And he tells her to surrender, and she does it. Now this results in a concussion, and she gets sort of taken out of the equation for a little while. Like, she goes back in order to fight Denim, but for the moment, it is really like a close thing. She could have been hurt badly enough that maybe she wasn't going to be allowed to fight later on in the day either. So I love Clara comes in to visit Nona when she's like, you know, recuperating, and says something about, because Clara is like fucked. She's got a busted lip. She's got 2 black eyes. And Clara says, you should see the other girl. And Nona says, you beat an apprentice? What? No. Are you mad? She pounded me. I meant Zoli. I love that moment. Of course I fucking didn't beat an apprentice. Look at my face. So apparently Zoli went up against the really tall Hunska girl, and Zoli like fought the fuck out of this bitch. And in retaliation, that girl, Talitha, wound up breaking Zoli's arm. So she's being sent back to the convent, which is pretty brutal. Like, and a broken arm, I mean, that's going to take months and maybe never function the same way again, depending on how it's set. But yeah, horrifying. So Sister Tallow comes in, and this is when Nona has to argue that she should get to fight again. And I like that she says, the world is a dangerous place. We do you no favors if we hide your weakness from you. You can fight. I like that line of thinking. Like, this is something that I feel like would probably be the hardest part of being a parent, is to just be like, you know what, after a point, you have to be allowed to make your own mistakes. I can't constantly warn you and protect you and make sure that you don't do XYZ. You need to figure this out yourself. Me just telling you that this is going to hurt you or turn out badly isn't going to be enough. You need to believe it because you know from experience. And that sounds like a terrible thing to watch a loved one go through. Also, there's a brief conversation between Partnus and Tallow outside the door. And Nona can hear her. Tallow is saying, we're returning to the convent. And she says, that's really not my concern, Reeve. And that he responds too low for her to hear. And Sister Tallow says, I don't care what he wants. Partnus Reeve reached for her arm before thinking better of it and withdrawing his hand as she stared at it. God, I love this moment of her just like staring and just being like, did you really just fucking touch me? Are you serious? Do you know who and what I am? Reconsider. And he says, I don't know what you've heard, sister, but he's not some street show villain. He's the heir to one of Empire's oldest families for ancestors' sake, a refined young man of considerable education. And Sister Tallow says something that Nona cannot hear. And he says, many young men have appetites. Such lapses are unfortunate, but... And she just fucking steps into the room and closes the door in his face. So I am really curious about this because obviously this is about Raymond Taxis wanting alone time with one of the girls. I assume that it was meant to be Nona, but I feel like they have to know about the feud between the two of them and they'd never allow that anyway, so I don't see Partnus actually asking for that. Maybe it was one of the other girls that they're like trying to, and basically, you know, understandably, Sister Tallow is like, no, are you fucking high? Absolutely not. And this guy's like, but do you know who he is? He's very important. And she's just like, you know what? Go fucking suck 1,000 dicks, dude. Like, I am not interested. And good for you. I really appreciate Tallow. I really do. So here comes the thing. Here comes the fucking moment. Nona goes into the ring, and Denim is just... a rock wall. Like, she is landing all kinds of kicks. What I'm picturing is just a boulder that she's leaping around, kicking and smacking, and she's doing all of these movements and sharp pointed attacks that on a regular person would have had them collapsing. But this fucking guy, it's like nothing penetrates. And it's becoming clear that she's just starting to like exhaust herself. And finally, she gets, like, she does the groin attack. It does hurt. It's like one of the first times that there's much of a reaction, but it doesn't put him down either. And at each break, when she won clear and waited for Denham to catch up, she risked glances toward Raymel Taxis. He wore an ugly smile now, anticipating the moment when her resources would be so drained as to allow Denham to snag her. The Noigwyn assassins and corrupting the ancestors' high priest must have lightened even the Taxis purse. But how much had it cost to have Denham swear to break her back when he caught her, or put out her eyes with his thick fingers? A sovereign? Nona wouldn't be surprised to learn it was pennies, or perhaps just the cost of a polite request. Which, yikes, you know? So, the one advantage Nona's having here is as she is getting exhausted, so is Denham, because he is giant and having to move this giant body around is tiring. But because she is exhausted and so much smaller than him, her exhaustion kind of means more. And it's starting to be clear that he, like, is gonna have to catch up with her at some point. Like, it's getting closer and closer. Raymel yells out, "Enjoy your running. You won't be doing any more after today." And this is it. Nona loses her mind. She landed with legs bent, one foot against the back of Denham's hand, letting his momentum carry them both forward. As he whipped his hand up, trying both to dislodge and catch her, Nona straightened her legs, driving off the broad back of Denham's hand. To the onlooker, it would look as if he literally batted her into the air with a fumbled attempt to seize her. So she makes it look like this is all an accident. Again, I cannot imagine that the sisters don't recognize this for what it is, but apparently they don't, or they're just so okay with it that they're willing to play along with this charade because they do not like Raymel Taxis any more than anybody else. Nona comes in contact with Raymel's chest. She caught him around the back of the head to keep her place. Immediately, long before his hands could reach her, something else took hold, as if some unseen and clawed hand had sunk its talons into her mind, cutting through memories, letting emotion bleed out. She felt them. She felt whatever it was that now shared Raymel's skull, the passengers that had ridden him back from his long stay trapped on the border between life and death. They lurked under his skin, watched her from his crimson eye. Some instinct told her that although both eyes lighted on her, only the red eye truly saw her, and more, it recognized her. Something woke inside Nona as her gaze locked with whatever lay hidden inside the ring fighter's skull. Their communion lasted only an instant, but her speed drew it out into an age. A deep and twisting sensation enveloped her, half pain, half sickness. And she has a moment where she's like, should I just leave? Should I just get off him? Or should I mark him up? Or should I just kill him? And she is intending to kill him. She lets all of the knives that are in her fingertips come out, calling them talons here, rakes them across his throat, intending to cut his throat, and bounces out. And it turns out that she didn't do the damage that she fucking thought. It is, first of all, she's so distracted that Denham almost catches her. But Sister Tallow busts in before he can grab, because I think she is aware of the deal that was made here. She caught Denham's wrist in a pincered grip, taking his little finger in her other hand. A moment later, he was on his knees in the ring above them, crying for release in a voice hoarse with agony. Aw, Tallow, you the MVP right here. You really are. So it turns out, yeah, Raymel Taxus, like, she has blades that can sink into stone. It says 6 inches into a stone wall. But something about his flesh resisted this cut. It just left a shallow cut hardly parting the skin instead of a devastating wound. With the red tide of her anger ebbing, Nona realized that she could have been standing there with gory hands before 100 witnesses to the murder of a lord's son. Yeah, I'm really, really glad that he's not dead for her sake. Of course, I want him dead because he's trash and he should be dead. But when she decided to kill him, as much as I had this like primal sort of elation at the idea, I definitely was like, girl, what are you fucking doing? There's 1 million people here. You just got pardoned and like brought into this community after trying to like, are you seriously going to do this right now and just undo everything Abbess Glass did for you? But in the end, she is saved from herself by whatever the fuck is going on with Raymel. And he turns and just stares at her. And it seems like he is he is not really like fully there. It feels like whatever is inside him is the thing that's the most in control, is the vibe that I'm getting. It's not like there's like he's sharing space. It feels like he's being edged out by something else. And Nona winds up coping with this like thing inside her that continually makes her feel sick and seems to have a really strong reaction to Marjol conjuring for some reason. No, details on what that means, of course, because we don't know what either thing is really. But for whatever reason, one of her friends is like practicing and showing that she can like create mist figures and whatnot using the mist that comes up when the focus moon is out. And that winds up causing Nona some extreme pain, which she doesn't realize at the moment is related until another thing a little bit later. So yeah, it's just an interesting, like, there's a lot happening here. We go to the poison class, and this is Sister Apple, and she's talking about how to handle shadows and create, hiding places for yourself, essentially. And she goes on for quite a while. I really, really liked her talking about how the key here is understanding that light sources and shadows are like not constants. Now, in our world where we live today, that's not necessarily true because we have electric light sources. And there is some flickering, like it's on a microscopic level, but I don't know that a human eye would be able to detect that. And there will be like fixed objects, so it won't be exactly the same. But in this world, everything is candles and flames when darkness falls. So that is absolutely true. So what she's saying is that the understanding of the movement of shadows is just as important as being able to create that appearance of darkness, because you can't be still. You have to constantly be adapting and imitating in order to blend in, which I thought was really interesting. And let's see. A sick sensation crawled up around Nona's stomach, the same feeling she'd been experiencing since the Kaltess forging. I don't like it. And what she thinks is that Raymel maybe tried to poison her. Because, the poisoner has talked about different methods of long, slow, agonizing death by poisoning. And she knows that that's the kind of death that this guy would wish on her. But it is weird to me that she leapt on him and touched him and sensed something else inside him. And she's not making the connection between that and this feeling. Like, obviously, he is being possessed by something and it is trying to like get in on you too. Now, it may have succeeded. I don't know how this sort of thing works. I don't know what's got him. I don't know how it got there in the first place, or if he is being used by someone else, or if this is something that like he wanted and invited in. But whatever the case, I feel like this is the fact that she doesn't seem to be putting two and two together surprises me a little bit. So at this point, Clara and Nona sort of like talk back to Sister Apple, who continually was stressing the importance of patience. And she gets irritated with them, and she comes, like, tells them each to come up. And in the meantime, has been playing with these shadows in each of her hands. And when she opens them, the shadow has like turned into these little tiny pills. And she tells both Clara and Nona to take them. Now, Clara doesn't manage to swallow hers. She spits it out, and it doesn't wind up mattering. She's still like absorbed enough. But Nona forces herself to swallow it. And then the poisoner asks Clara, have you ever cheated in one of my exams? Nona immediately answers, even though the question was not directed toward her. And she says no. And Clara admits that she has a couple of times. And the poisoner says, you would do well to sew your lips together, novices. Truth is an axe. Without judgment, it's swung in great circles, wounding everybody. I really love this. This is something like people brag really about being brutally honest all the time. And I used to be this way as well. But I've gotten older and realized that that's not necessarily a fucking like, usually when people talk about being honest, they talk about being brutally honest. And when they mean brutally honest, what they mean is I'm going to be mean. And that's not necessary. You know, there are times where somebody really needs to hear an unvarnished truth, and it needs to be harsh to sink in. But those really do tend to be the minority of situations. And people who pride themselves on just slinging, like, quote, truth, they never sling truth when it's a positive. They're never brutally honest about, you are a really kind, beautiful person. That's never what the fucking emphasis is ever on. It's always, I'm brutally honest with my criticism. And it's just, you know, it's an excuse to be shitty. And I appreciated her being like, you know, that's not the advantage to truth at all times is not significant. We try and act like truth is this like thing to aim for. Why? No, not necessarily. So then she asks Nona, what are you afraid of me asking? And Nona says, I'm afraid you'll ask me what really happened to make my mother sell me. And Apple looks surprised by this and then immediately sidesteps and is like, who do you have a crush on? And Nona says, Arabella and you and Regal, and then sprints out of the room. And everybody behind her is just like laughing. I kind of love this. I'm not going to lie. Like, it's humiliating and terrible, and I'm mad about it, but also like, it's so precious. They go outside and it's like they can't control them. They have to keep talking. So the only thing that they can do is to sprint away from one another. Right before that, Clara pulls out a 5-pointed, or a 4-pointed throwing star. And Nona asks, where did you get that? Clara says, partness. And then they sprint apart. And Nona never goes back and asks what that was about, because she considers it a kindness that Clara never asked directly why her mother sold her. So as far as she's concerned, they're pretty much even. But Clara like winds up volunteering a little bit. She says, he wants me to fight for him. My father told him I wouldn't take the red when I'm done here. And then Anyway, why did your mother sell you then? And they get like cut off. So she lets it land, and lets it sit, even though I think she knows Clara's not telling her the whole story. She's like, you know what? I didn't wind up having to answer this because they get interrupted. And she just is willing to let it sit and not press the issue with Clara so that Clara will not press the issue with her. So yeah, that's a pretty intense moment that I rather liked. So, okay. Martin says Nona fancies Ara, Nona Bella train full steam ahead. I mean, part of me wants that, but like another part of me is like, I feel like it's too soon to say. They're so young. I have 5 minutes left and I still have like 2 chapters to cover. Oh, I am so screwed. Well, first is the sitting next to the sinkhole. And this is the moment when Nona has kind of like a sick reaction to Ruli, who is manipulating the steam that comes up from the moon. And I have to point out, too, that it turns out the focus moon is fucking a red rectangle, which I don't know how I didn't catch on to the fact that it was a rectangle last time we talked about the moon. I thought it was a giant round disc that was launched into space. I didn't know it was a rectangle. And that sounds bonkers, to look up in the sky and see a giant rectangular moon. I love this. Like, what a weird thing. So yeah, she manages to make this steam that comes up look like a person. And Nona fucking doubles over. Like, she is in some serious pain to the point that she almost can't hide it from everybody. And a little bit later, this winds up happening so that she legit passes out at lunch. And her friends are like, are you okay? And this is when they find out that she maybe, low-key, was poisoned. And they want to help so bad. So what they decide to do is help her get the ingredients together to create what is called like the black antidote, I think it's called. And the thing about this antidote is that it's supposed to like basically cure you from practically any poison, but it could also kill you. It's a really huge risk to take to swallow it, even if it's made properly. And it is genuinely, when her friends make it, as much as their intentions are good, they do not get real fucking accurate with it. They have to guess a lot. So what winds up being made is something that's like risky in 1,000 ways instead of just the one. And what's weird is that there's this like sort of feeling that she gets that comes and goes of feeling better. So I'm going to get into this because this is like the most important part and I'm so over time. But Nona is, when she goes to find the ingredients for this antidote, she has to go into the caves around where Apple's class is. And when she does this, the caves, like she sort of just has to figure out exactly which is the more likely place because she doesn't have a good idea on where this stuff could be stored. And she sees this like footstep that has been placed, like this footprint that is placed right on the crack of this like fissure. And something about this is like making her, drawing her attention. So she goes into this fissure and it is very, very tight to the point that she starts to get really worried she's going to be lodged here and never be able to get out. And just as her panic begins to almost overwhelm her, she hears something and begins pursuing it and comes across Isht alone in the cave digging and like covered in sweat. She has been here clearly for a minute. And Nona later on, when she's talking to her friends about it, they want her to go and tell, but she doesn't have a way to explain what she was doing there without explaining that she was fucking stealing ingredients. And she doesn't want the sisters to know that this contact with Raymond might have been poisonous. Now, this is something that I don't really understand. If it was an accident that she came in contact with Raymond, and if it looks like an accident to everybody, which she seems to trust that it does, why would they hold it against her if she's feeling sick? All she needs to do is explain, like, maybe he saw me coming and he was ready, or maybe he planned to hit me with something later and he just got an opportunity sooner. But I feel ill and I think that he is why. Can you help me? I don't feel like she would get in trouble for that, but she seems to think that she would. Now, again, she manages to get all the ingredients for this potion, but once it's time and her friends have actually made it, she's feeling way better, and she doesn't really know why. Here's my theory. Something to do with the ship heart, because that seems to be what everyone thinks Isht was digging towards. And, well, not necessarily everybody, but it seems like it's entered a few of their minds. And I have to think that somehow, proximity to that heals her for a time. But the pain in her stomach does come back. So, and she's out walking with Arabella at one point after telling her about seeing Isht digging. And the two of them almost get killed by a giant chunk of falling ice. And she's like, yeah, that might have been an accident, or Isht knows that I fucking saw her and she has decided to take me out of the equation, which I don't need Isht to be after Nona. Isht is fucking so dangerous anyway. Can we just let her be dangerous the way that she is and not add to it by making her need to assassinate Nona, please? I would appreciate it. Yeah, so that is the end of chapter 33, is their near miss, their close brush with death. And they also find out that they're going to be going to the academy, and Nona has this weird moment of thinking that she's been there already, and Hessa has to be like, you haven't been there, you're just seeing my memory of it. And Nona has to stop and be like, am I? Oh my god. You're right, which is such a weird thing to genuinely not be able to tell the difference between someone else's memories and your own memories. I think that's kind of cool. But we'll see how this goes. Arabella, for her part, is very, very worried about going to this academy. She has this kind of paranoia about it. But everybody, by everybody, I mean, Hessa and Nona are not worried about it, because there's this she saw herself before them, one small novice in a habit still damp and smelling faintly of blackroot, who could, if she worked herself up in a frothing rage, shatter a few of their expensive flagstones. They're supposed to demonstrate the path. And she's just kind of I'm not going to be able to do this. So, oh well. She's just trying to not get herself too worked up over it, I think, because she knows that it's not going to do any good. So yeah, all right, I'm going to wrap. Martin, I am sorry that I didn't get to do this as thoroughly as I wanted. There was so much to talk about. I'm going to attempt to stay on track a little bit better next episode, but I hope that I did justice to the major bullet points of these chapters. And I just want to know what the ship part is. I just want to know. Somebody help. All right, guys. Thank you again for listening. I'll see you soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.